Just in case you had any doubt about whether you were coming to church today. So the perhaps slightly odd title of my sermon today came from a story that was told by now retired Episcopal Bishop Robert O'Neill. And I heard him tell this story at an awards breakfast a few years ago. He shared with us that when he was much younger and fresh out of seminary, in fact, the way he described it is that he was so fresh out of seminary and into the priesthood that the creases on his robes were still there. And he had gone to a retreat center for a conference of some kind. The retreat center was at a monastery where that was run by a bunch of older monks. And so he was there, and one of the things he said, when he first got out of seminary, he was just enraptured, just completely enamored with this idea of community. Community was going to save the world, and he was going to go out. His whole ministry was going to be about creating Christian community and ecumenical community, and that was just this great thing. So he's at the retreat center, and he's talking to one of the older monks who's there, and he's going on and on to this man about, oh, how awesome it must be to be doing what he was doing, living here in the monastery, and all you brothers, you all believe in the same God, and you all worship together, and you all work together. It must be this great sense of community. And he's going on and on and on. He said the old man was just sort of listening. Patiently. And when he finally ran out of steam, the older monk said, yeah. Community. Let me tell you about community. It's excruciating. Even so, in this month when our whole soul living theme is common ground, it seems something of a no-brainer that at least one of our Sundays this month should be about community. And as was true 10 years ago, it's still true today. When you ask people here in the congregation what they love about the church, one of the things nearly everyone mentions is community. We love the community, the sense of community, our aspirations of community. People love these twin ideas that not only is every single soul sacred and worthy, but there's a unity that makes us one. The first phrase of our brand new vision statement that we adopted last year is, community is inspired. So when I first thought about the title, Community is Excruciating, I kind of thought of it as a joke. And you should know that I kept the title because of community, which is to say that a number of people that I love and respect, including our music director and our church administrator and my wife, all told me they thought this was a wonderful title. Go figure. And I don't know for sure about Sarah or Glenn, but I can say with assurance that my deeply beloved wife, even though she believes in community, even though she loves and admires many of the people who are in this one, still and also believes that like coffee hour after church in the community room must surely resemble one of the deeper circles of hell. Anybody relate to this? It's not that she doesn't love you. She just likes her groups a lot smaller. And in fact, the truth is, hardly anyone can come here on a Sunday morning and make a meaningful connection in this building with several hundred people in it. Most of us, the vast majority of us, will only meaningfully connect with much smaller groups of people in ones and twos, up to a maximum of probably about 10 or so. So there are deep tensions that are inherent and perhaps inescapable in human community. So years ago, here's a personal story. Years ago, I was a very junior engineer, just months after graduating. In fact, the creases on my khakis were probably still there. I had just started working for Motorola. I was eating lunch with a group of senior engineers. And they were talking about politics and education. So this was about 1984. And Ronald Reagan is enormously popular. And what is in the news is this recent report that has come out about how American schools are failing. And I watched this group of distinguished, and in some ways, astonishingly intelligent men, they were all men, say some of the dumbest things I've heard in a long, that I can remember hearing. I'm not kidding. This is the way I remember the conversation. They were talking about education, and one of them shared an anecdote that they had heard or read somewhere about a teacher who had actually fallen asleep in their classroom. And somebody else shared some anecdote they had heard or read somewhere about how there was a teacher that had cheated about putting in their test scores to make it look like their students were doing better than they actually were, and heads are nodding around the table, and somebody said, well, yeah, it's the teachers, that's the problem with education. And I just thought to myself, really? But I kept my own thoughts to myself. Because, well, I think this is a common story for many of us. There's a real tension in many of the communities that are a part of. And despite the fact that I had great respect for the technical abilities and the career professional accomplishments of these people, their vast, and I mean vast, detailed knowledge of their specific fields. And in that sense, this was a community of professionals that I really, really wanted to be a part of. I wanted to learn from them. I wanted to be accepted by them. I very much aspired to one day be as respected as they were. On the other hand, there were social aspects of that particular community that were going to be forever closed to me. Completely closed. We were never going to agree about any number of social and political issues that were really important to me, and this kind of created a dilemma that I bet all of us are familiar with this dilemma. So I needed these people. Right? I needed them to like me at least a little. Just enough so that we could work together well. And just enough so even beyond the day-to-day interactions that we would have, I needed them to like me well enough so that when good projects or the opportunities for advancements came up, that they at least wouldn't become obstacles to me, which they were certainly capable of doing. And I felt at the time, sitting around that lunch table, I felt like keeping my mouth shut. It felt like kind of a moral compromise. That's how it felt. Not that I was actually doing anyone any harm by keeping my mouth shut, but I wasn't really being true to who I was either. And like most young people, still in the process of figuring out, claiming an identity, it seemed really important somehow that I be true to myself. And I tell that story, again, not because it was particularly excruciating or traumatic, but only to illustrate something I believe every one of us is familiar with. We often hide our true identities. We often hide the things we really think. We hide the person that we really are. Because to otherwise stand out or stand up or speak up puts us at risk. Or at least it feels like it would put us at risk. Sometimes maybe great risk of being shut out, shut down, criticized, shunned, or even attacked. Parker Palmer uses the words soul and role to distinguish between our inner selves, our more or less true selves that we often keep secret, and our outer selves, the one we present to the world, the roles we play for other people in our work and social and family, and maybe even our church situations. And all of this points to an even deeper tension. Because if we're really honest with ourselves, if we're really honest, our inner lives aren't always all that reliable or true either. All right, psychology is pretty clear that the more any of us remain locked in our own heads, isolated from authentic community, unwilling or unable to share ourselves out loud with other human beings, the more neurotic, delusional, and paranoid we tend to become. And the reality is, human beings have a seemingly boundless ability for self-absorption, self-deception, and just flat-out denial. Am I wrong? In the news recently, there have been some articles and interviews about the use of solitary confinement in Colorado prisons. But I think most of us understand that as awful as it would be to be physically confined and forcibly shut off from human contact, there is some degree, some amount, to which every single one of us already does that to ourselves in our own heads. A sort of willful, voluntary, solitary confinement, if you will, not of the body, but of the mind and of the soul. That's what can happen when we develop patterns of relating that are not authentic. Or when we are in the closet about something, or any time we adopt a role and then end up doing it so well and so long that we can no longer distinguish role from soul. I was counseling a couple, actually not too long ago, where the primary complaint that she had was that her spouse never engaged in conversation with her beyond the superficial logistics and pleasantries of their lives. And after a couple meetings, where both of us were kind of trying to draw this person out, she said to him in exasperation, she said, "I don't even know who you are anymore." And after a long silence, he finally choked out, "I don't either." That is a really sad, sad story. Parker Palmer articulates some of the symptoms of losing touch with a more authentic, deeper sense of identity. We can go through life sensing or feeling that something is missing. And we go looking for that, whatever it is. We go looking for it in the world, not understanding that what is missing can only come from within. Having a vague sense, or maybe even a strong sense, of being a fraud somehow in this world. Or that we are invisible. Again, because we are not in the world in an authentic way. We can often, I see this all the time, I'm sure you do too, we can project our own inner darkness onto others. Making others into enemies, believing that the world is a dangerous and a threatening place. We might painfully discover that the light that is within us, and I believe that there is a light within all of us, we might painfully discover that the light within us can no longer get out and illuminate the dark places around us. We might painfully discover that inauthenticity makes real relationships impossible, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of ever more entrenched and profound loneliness. And just in case what I'm getting at isn't clear, I'm going to borrow this analogy again from Parker Palmer. You know, if you get lost in New York City, you can buy a map or find a cab driver who knows where to go. But if you get lost on your inner journey towards wholeness, peace, inner strength, authentic love, the only guidance available to you is going to come from you sharing your story, sharing your thoughts, sharing your soul with another human being. You won't get it from a book. You won't get it from visiting another website. You won't even get it from journaling or from sitting in a silent retreat. Even the gurus eventually have to leave the mountain hermitage and come back to the rest of us. Staying connected is one of the ways we stay sane. And it's kind of an unfortunate truth, but the truth is that it's really, really hard to do that in the culture we live in. Really, really hard, because to create and sustain real connection and real community in this world is countercultural. And culture is powerful stuff. It goes against creating real connection, real community, goes against every message we get from our larger culture, which puts all of us, all the time, under enormous, unrelenting pressure to live lives of fantastic superficiality. The culture we live in gets it exactly wrong and backwards, in my opinion. We divide and isolate ourselves, thinking that's what we need to do to be safe, but the truth is that the more divided and isolated we become, the more divisions we perpetuate, the more divisiveness we allow, the less safe and the less sane we become. And this is true for us as individuals, this is true for us as a community, this is true for us as a culture. I know I am not alone. Sometimes it just feels like the whole jiving world is living la vida loca, right? The crazy life. I think part of the reason the community can be so excruciating is that we've actually forgotten how to do it well. Within ourselves and with each other. Certainly we are capable, but again, the culture, as a culture, I think we've just gotten out of the habit. At some deep level of our being and our belief system, all of us, at some level, we have bought into the myth that we are, or that we even could be, isolated beings in an essentially competitive and hostile world. One last tension that is worth mentioning. Brené Brown, I'm not sure how she says her name, in her wonderful TED Talk, holds up this odd phenomenon that, if you ask people about community, they share with you their most painful experiences of being excluded. When you ask people about friendship, they share with you their most painful experiences of being betrayed. When you ask people about love, they start talking to you about their most awful experiences of abandonment. Because there is this deep tension in all of us. We don't want to be too vulnerable because that's dangerous. It puts us at risk. It doesn't feel safe. And the other side of that is being vulnerable, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, is the only way to open up our hearts, to open up our relationships, to open up the creative potential that is within us. You cannot selectively shut yourselves down. So to come back to this First Unitarian, this inspired and, frankly, sometimes excruciating community that we share. Let me move towards closing with a short exercise that I invite you to try. It is an exercise of the imagination. You can close your eyes, I don't care. But the reason for doing this is an exercise of imagination, and the reason for doing it is because I don't think our vision of being an inspired community is gonna just happen, right? Like, finding a penny on the sidewalk or something. I don't think it's gonna work that way. I think we're going to need a vision of some kind that we can actually articulate and believe is possible. So I invite us to just take a moment and imagine. Imagine the church community that you truly, truly long for, hunger for, wish existed in this world. What does it look like? What does it feel like? How are the people there behaving? How do you behave? What are the emotions and thoughts in your head as you look around at these people with whom you commune? I believe there's great value in doing this kind of imagining. Because I suggest to you that if we cannot envision it, if we won't take the time to imagine it, it isn't going to just magically happen. Right? That old adage is true. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, and any leader will do. So here's some of my own vision for this amazing, sometimes excruciating, profoundly connected community. I envision us being the best First Unitarian Denver congregation that we can possibly be. And I'm not really talking here about numerical growth or this program or that program or more staff. I'm just talking about us being the best church community that we can possibly be. I want us to be the best First Unitarian Denver that has ever been. And we've been around for like 143 years, and there have been some really awesome First Unitarian Denvers in this world. I envision us being the best liberally religious congregation in the greater Denver area. And I envision us being the best Unitarian Universalist church in the whole jiving denomination. No, I'm not kidding. In my vision of the future, it will one day be a common occurrence for the mayor of our city and the governor of our state to lean over to their aides during meetings and say, "What's First Unitarian saying about this issue?" In my vision of the future, my phone's going to ring every time some reporter from the Denver Post or one of the local radio or news stations wants to get a faith perspective on the issue of the day. Take an amen somewhere. Amen. My vision for the future of this community, we understand deeply that we teach people of every age. We teach people what it means to be in religious community with every single thing we do from the moment they step on our property. Every single thing we do, it is present in how we greet people. It is present. It is there in who is here and who is absent. It's in the condition and cleanliness of our worship and meeting spaces, the comfort of our chairs or the lack thereof. It's in the expectations of noise and silence. It's in the way we use or don't use name tags. It's in the inclusiveness of our language, the unspoken expectations. It's in the freshness of the cookies and the quality of the coffee. It's in the way we treat strangers and the way we treat each other. It is present in how real we are willing to get with each other. All of it, every bit of it, teaches people, for better or for worse, what it means, what we believe it means to be a church community. In my vision of the future, we are a religious community that understands that at the very root and core of actually being a religious community is we stand in an authentic relationship to the mysteries that are beyond our comprehension. And I know, and you know, that we live in a world, we live in a world that is deeply fragmented, fractured, if you will. And I know, I believe that we feel this. We feel this like a weight, like a burden on our beings, on our souls. And it can lead us to despair. And I know that despair weighs on us sometimes. But here's what I believe is possible. Here's what I believe we can be. What you can be. The next time you're in your community, in your family, with your coworkers, sitting around a lunch table somewhere, with your neighbors, your friends, and people are going, and that despair is in the air, and people are going on about the woes of the world, wouldn't it be awesome if you could look them right in the eye and say, you know, there is a better way. Let me tell you what's going on down in my church. I could go on and on, but you get the idea. Remember the vision. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Remember that even a small group of committed people can do astonishing things in this world. Amen.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Closing affirmation, our affirmation, is printed on the front of your order of service. And we read this in unison at the end of every service, and once we've finished reading it, we will stand together in a moment of silence. Our congregation is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. it be so. And by way of benediction, this occurred to me at the early service, that I think for the first time I can joyfully say that after the service, I'll see you in hell.